Meanwhile, we're learning all this other stuff in school that, goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
So it's, kind of reteaching ourselves as adults that everything we're experiencing with our anxiety is so normal. And there is so much that we can do that we just maybe haven't learned yet.
Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Podcast, where soulful entrepreneurship and holistic mind-body wellness meet to help you heal, discover your soul's purpose, and change the world. I'm your host, Gabby Ortega, entrepreneur, psychology expert, social media maven, and soulful leadership coach. And it's my mission to empower you into becoming the light leader you're meant to be. Each episode will be diving deep into topics that will help you gain personal mastery over your healing and mind-body wellness, while also giving you practical tips and tools to help you create, market, and scale a heart-centered business around your soul's purpose and life mission. Whether you're in the beginning of your self-awakening journey or a seasoned inner work god or goddess who's ready to step into their leadership as a soulpreneur, this is going to be your new favorite place to be. We know that you don't just want to feel happier and more fulfilled, but you want to deeply know yourself and powerfully step into your life's purpose while creating massive abundance around your mission. That's why I've created this podcast for you, the light leader of the next generation. Welcome home. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I'm Gabby Ortega, your host, and it's Casual Friday here. We're recording on a Friday. I am in my big comfy sweatshirt. I have my hair in a bun, no fucks given. I have my coffee, and I'm really, really excited. Today we have a good friend of mine, also a former client of mine, and a fellow badass therapist and coach. Her name is Rachel Kelley, and Rachel is a former therapist turned emotional wellness coach, and she's the founder of Rachel Kelley Coaching, which is a bomb-ass resource for any of those who are helping, or any of those of you who are suffering from anxiety. And she really helps women specifically regulate their nervous systems and heal from trauma, creating internal safety in their bodies so they can live from a place of calm, joy, and ease, and all the good things. So welcome. Thank you for being with us today, Rachel.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's the place to be. This is where I like to hang out. This is where I get to really share my uncensored self because, apps these days can be very censored.
Especially these days.
It is really crazy, right? But I think it has a lot to do with our topic, which is anxiety. A lot of things going on in the world, a lot of things, which is on top of just a lot of things that we experience every day, just living lives as human beings, dealing with, trauma potentially, or just difficult life situations, chaos. And I know, from talking to my community online, really the last year and more has been so anxiety provoking that, it's hard to function sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially these days, we were just talking about how going back to school and going back to work and kind of summer wrapping up and just everything going on in the world right now, definitely is just so much to provoke anxiety in more ways than one. So I think we're all together on that one. We can relate.
Yeah. And anxiety is like a normal response, right? So if we're really looking at what is anxiety, it's your body's response to stress. It's
Right.
not a personal fault. It's not like something is wrong with you. It's how we survive. It's how our body lets us know that what's going on is potentially not good for us or harming us or causing us some kind of pain so that we can actually take conscious steps to help ourselves. Now, the problem is some of these things we can take steps to change, and some of these things are things that we just literally have no power over. And
Yep.
if you've been living through the pandemic, or if you haven't been, I don't know where you've been, but I want to go there. But if you've been at all alive and not under a rock, we're dealing with multiple global traumas, war, famine, oppression, and then we have the pandemic, and then we have in the United States specifically so many different things happening with politics, with families that are separating, with people that are fighting, and just all of these things. So I get approached a lot from my community about how do I deal with anxiety, not just when it's stuff I can control, like, I can set a boundary, right? But when it comes to like the things that are just really way out of our control, like how do I survive this? Like how do I move through this? And I know you're an expert in helping women with this stuff, and humans in general like can benefit from this info. So I'd love to hear what your take on it is.
Yeah, definitely. So this is actually super fitting time-wise because I actually just did a live this morning about using radical acceptance for the things that we cannot change. So could not be a better timing. But yeah, I think that is one of the first steps that I help my clients in navigating all of this, is really discerning between, is it something that we do have control over versus not, because there are so many things, as we know, that we don't have any control over. But I also think that when the anxiety shows up for us, we do have a lot of control in how we respond to it, that we may forget about in the moment. So I think the biggest initial step that I start helping people with is really developing a more adaptive relationship with their anxiety. Because I know I've been there, and my clients repeatedly tell me, I'm feeling anxious. I hate it. Why am I anxious all the time? I wish this anxiety would go away. It's an automatic, almost like judgment of themselves for feeling that way. And so the first step is exactly what you said, recognizing that the anxiety is there, not by coincidence, but for a very important reason. And if we didn't have it, we probably wouldn't be alive right now. Yeah. So not only does it help us survive, but it helps communicate crucial things about when we're feeling out of alignment, or when we're unsafe, or when a historical wound from childhood is showing up, making us feel unsafe. And it provides so much opportunity for us to be able to recreate that internal safety that we're trying to seek externally, on a daily basis. So for me, that's been kind of the pivotal thing in my relationship with my anxiety, is really being able to change it to a more positive, adaptive, I'm grateful for my anxiety. And also I can tell it to calm down what it needs to when I know I'm safe, right? So I can be like, thank you, anxiety, for showing up, and I'm good. I don't need you right now. Come back another time.
Oh my God, yes. And that's the thing too. I think so many of us don't invite the feeling in because we're afraid of looking at it or facing it, because our unconscious really views these things as being painful, these feelings as being like almost equating it with physical pain, actually, because it can't tell the difference. So emotional pain is physical pain, and the brain is like, nah, bro, we're not going to do this today. So anxiety is like, it causes so much distress, and in many ways makes us act in ways that may not be in alignment with who we are. And, being able to figure out how to take a pause and look at the things that, like you said, we do have control over, and the things that we don't, and kind of saying, okay, let me focus on what I do have control over, which sometimes all you do have control over is your perception and the way you interpret and create meaning around things. And, your internal safety, like you said. It's funny. I think about, I've read studies about people who have been tortured, in these political prisons, or, have been tortured in concentration camps and things like that. And the way that they survived, many of them, was by creating a perception that would allow them to get through the experience, and right. Using mindfulness, using visualization, using like the brain to almost disassociate and escape from what was happening around them, because they had no control over what was going. They were stuck there. There were bad things that were happening to them, and they found a way to disassociate and disappear into their internal world, which they made very safe so that they could survive these horrific experiences. So like the things, the fact that you have in that internal safety, that ability to kind of create a space for yourself where you can breathe, is so crucial to getting through even the worst kinds of most helpless and painful situations that we're in.
Absolutely. And it just shows how incredibly powerful our minds are that we can even do that. We can be in the most horrific situations and be living in, at times, what feels like a pretty horrific world, and be able to create that for ourselves. There's nothing more empowering and amazing that we can actually do that for ourselves. And it can definitely give us hope when we're feeling hopeless of how are we ever supposed to feel safe in such an unsafe world. And that's when we notice that we tend as humans to look externally. We look outward, which is totally understandable because we need connection to survive. We need, certain things externally, of course. And a lot of the times it's looking for those external kind of temporary fixes that relieve the anxiety temporarily rather than turning inward, because we're not taught that, right? You and I talk about this all the time, how we are not taught any of this in school, and we grow up feeling this anxiety and like feeling this stored trauma in our bodies, and we have no idea why it's there or how to do anything about it. Meanwhile, we're learning all this other stuff in school that, goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
So it's, kind of reteaching ourselves as adults that everything we're experiencing with our anxiety is so normal, and there is so much that we can do that we just maybe haven't learned yet. And that's not to shame yourself for that. It's to normalize that you just weren't taught it, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are talking about this stuff more often so that we can spread knowledge and hopefully empower people to take ownership over the relationship they have with their anxiety, so that it doesn't feel like this enemy that they're trying to get rid of, like this thing they need to cure, but really just to be able to develop more adaptive ways of responding to it, and even just noticing why it's showing up in the first place.
Yeah. And, it comes to mind is I just had a client just before we recorded this. And we were talking about her kind of, oh man, what was I going to, oh man, my thought. Oh, my
Lost it.
thought just ran away with me. And it was such a good point. What were you just saying?
Creating more adaptive ways of responding to the anxiety, like our relationship with anxiety.
Okay. Sorry. My brain does this fart sometimes. But basically that it's a shadow, right? Like we might grow up in situations where our family was really hyped up on the positive emotions, and we're great at expressing like when we're happy and when we're, feeling good. But when it comes to like when we're feeling anxious, or we're feeling really sad, or we're feeling really hopeless, or whatever, that those feelings weren't mirrored in a healthy way of like how to respond to those. And a lot of that, if you're a millennial, or even Gen Z, like older Gen Z, like, you kind of probably have parents who like stuff it down, right? They don't want you to see that they're anxious. They don't want you to be stressed out by their stress, or they don't want to cry in front of you because they don't want to scare you, or whatever it might be, whatever reason. But then those feelings become internalized shadows, and they become shadow parts of who we are, right? We're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this anxiety. It's bad. I got to get rid of it. Or I don't know what to do with this fear, or this whatever feeling of sadness that's like, that was kind of taught to me through the behavior that I witnessed from my caregivers or people around me. Like these feelings are not things that we know how to deal with. So we're just going to skip over them and quote unquote, and like kind of brush it under the rug and like suck it up and kind of move on. And that's it. And they'll go away. And that is such a disastrous way of operating, because like these quote shadow parts that we kind of deny ourselves the space to explore aren't going to kill us. They're not as scary as we think they are. And actually inviting these feelings in, like anxiety for tea, I like to say, and like, very like, this is something I learned from one of my Buddhist teachers, like you invite these feelings in for tea and you ask them, what are they here to tell you? And like, how are they here to support you? And like, you see them, and when you actually look at them, they go away. Which is like, the key is not to push it away. It's actually to invite it in, and to know that you'll be okay in your body, feeling safe in your body to invite those feelings in.
Right. I think that's the ironic part about it, is that when people are numbing or repressing or avoiding that said emotion, it's because they want it to go away. And then the ironic part is that if you actually invite it in for tea, or, however you want to think about it, that is the end result, is that maybe it, decreases in its intensity, or you have a better understanding of where it's coming from, or maybe it comes back or it doesn't go away completely, but you have a much better chance of it at least decreasing and not having as much power over you in your emotional mental state than you would if you were to just skip over it. And what you said about the shadow just reminds me so much of this conversation I was having with a friend yesterday, how in the spiritual community, there's a lot of talk of shadow work and befriending your shadow. And sometimes when we engage in these, behaviors where we're seeking that external safety, we use that as kind of almost like a valid excuse of like, oh, I'm going to befriend my shadow tonight and just let myself, drink a bottle of tequila or like do my shadow things, like the dark parts of me, like engaging in these behaviors.
That is not, guys, that's just that's not shadow work.
Right. And that is not to say that we're supposed to be these perfect humans that never engage in these behaviors, because when we're doing so, it's often to seek safety. But the whole point is befriending your shadow is actually those parts of ourselves, not like the shadow behaviors of like drinking and partying, all this stuff, but actually the shadow parts of ourselves that we are so afraid to look at, that we almost like hype them up in our mind of, if I look at this, it feels like I'm going to die. Like our nervous systems literally feel like we're dying, but we're not. And that's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, I promise you, if you sit with this emotion and you invite it in and you communicate with it, I promise you, you will not die and it will not last forever and you will be better off for it. Mm-hmm. And it's really just like anything, a skill that you practice of, rather than kind of skipping over it and not being your immediate response, being really intentional with how you notice and then respond to it rather than just kind of reacting to it.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Easier said than done.
Yeah, easier said than done. I know some people are probably like, well, I know I'm anxious. It's not that I don't know. Like, I know I'm anxious every single day and I know what it's about. And have you actually sat with that?
Yes. Exactly.
There's a difference between cognitively and intellectually knowing what it is that's stressing you out, and I want you to keep digging and be annoying with yourself. And our mutual best friend, coach, client person, Yarrow. Yeah. I love her so much. She's one of my clients and now is coaching Rachel. She's just like a doll and I love her so much, and she's such a fucking powerful healer and she's part of our own family. She will love that I shouted her out on this. She loves digging, and I love the digging, and it's asking, but why? But why? But why? But why? And I know she'll probably, attest this to her work with Dr. Gabor Mate and his work and what he teaches. But she did that with me, and it was so awesome. And I loved being called out a little bit because I was like, oh, I'm exploring my fear. I know what I'm scared of. I'm scared of, expanding my business and like doing it in a way that's like falls apart and then it all goes away, this big fear is like, yeah, of course, I'm really feeling that as my business right now is expanding and we're trying new things and all of that. And some things are working and some things aren't, and we're learning, and it's kind of like that growing process, that growing phase. And but I wasn't asking myself, like, what was the root of the fear? Where does it come from? Like really exploring it. And that's why the fear wasn't going away. And that's why I was like having a lot of trouble stepping into my voice and my power at this new level that I really know I want to be at. And I am at internally, it feels like.
Right.
But it's like that questioning of, okay, well, why is this my fear? Well, because I've created something that I love. I've created a business and a mission that feels so fucking personal to me that if it was to go away, I don't know that I would live. And it's like, wow, okay, there's like this fear that if it goes away, I'll have no purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is the why.
Yeah. And then it went away. And then I woke up the next day and I was like on my stories and I was like, had so much to say in these posts and I was like spicy and I was like at it and I was like, here I am. And I'm like, oh my God. But that process of questioning, going deeper, what is that root, like core thing that is the thing? And you get to that. It's almost like a pimple you get to pop, and it's really satisfying and it's gone. It's so satisfying.
It really is, because it just makes so much sense. I love just making sense of things, because you're like, okay, I know this, but why this and da-da-da. And then you get to the root and you're like, oh, like this light bulb. I'll never forget, that was one of my favorite parts of Ignite, is when she came in to do the chanting workshop, and someone said something about like, I'm fearful of this, and I think it's because of this. And Yarrow just interrupts. She was like, that's not why. Dig deeper. And then she was like, maybe because of this. And she was like, one step deeper. And she just kept getting her there. And then I just remember like the light on her face when she was just like, oh, that's why, Yep. And I had one of those moments yesterday too, during our session, when it was, it's the same thing of like, we rationalize all the time. Well, I understand that I'm anxious about this, and I think it's because this. And so that doesn't make any sense. Why would I be anxious about that? Like rationally, I know it's fine. And we almost like justify to ourselves as if that's going to alleviate the anxiety. And then she did the same process of like, take it one step further. Okay, no, keep going back. And it's usually like something in childhood, some attachment wound. And we got to the place and I was like, oh shit, like that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And it really changed the way I felt about the whole situation. Like it really not only alleviated the anxiety, but it's almost like the universe then tested me with a similar situation right after. Like, no joke, this all happened yesterday. And then once that situation happened, I didn't react and get triggered the same way that I would have before I got to the root. Yeah. Because now I have this understanding of the root. And so I'm able to create that internal safety in that moment and say, okay, this is happening, and I get triggered, because it triggers this wound with my mom. And I know that this person is not my mom, and I can talk myself, and feel it in my body so that I'm able to like basically communicate to my body that it's not in that past moment as a child, that we're here in the present and that I'm safe. And I swear it's just such a life changer. Like once you get to that root. And it's just funny how so many people think they've gotten to the root, and then you take it one step further and it's like ding, 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 ding.
And it literally punches you in the face because you feel it in your body so resonant.
Yes.
Like you feel it. You're like, there it is.
As soon as yesterday in our session, she was like, is it possible that maybe this has to do with your mom and feeling like this person was taking you away from her? And it was just like this wave of clarity. I was like, oh my God. And it almost feels so obvious, but it's not.
Right?
You're so sneaky. I'm like, why didn't I think of that?
Sometimes it's like that person to help you pull. And this is why I love like doing what I do. And I'm sure you love being a coach. It's like we get to help you pull out the things that you can't see for yourself. And that's why we have coaches and people to support us. But it is like, it does feel very obvious. And also like how is this so hidden from plain sight from me for so long?
Right. And it's always way more simplified than we make it out. Like obviously these things are layered and nuanced, and you're kind of parsing through, I imagine like this whole kind of basket of, sewing needle and thread, right? And it's like you're trying to parse it out to actually see it clearly. And once you do, it almost feels so simplified of like, oh, so it just has to do with safety. When I get triggered and I start reacting instead of intentionally responding, it's coming from a historical wound of not feeling safe, right? Because in my example of, this person feeling like this person was taking my mom from me and not feeling like I had her present with me. What does that mean for a 4-year-old? It means like, oh, if I don't have mom, I'm not safe. Right. So then that gets triggered in the present. And then I have to, I respond the same way. But then it's like rationally, I know, oh, this person that just triggered that, they're not my mom. Right. Like that's pretty obvious. And yet it can still trigger the same physical feeling in your body that is so, so real. Right. Like we can know all this stuff rationally of like, this person's not my mom. It's not the same situation, all of that. And we can validate that the physical somatic experience of that is so real, right? And that's how we kind of then get back to present, create that internal safety. But it's a process.
It's a process. And like give yourself that like the divine and,
Right. I love the and.
like my intellectual self, my conscious self knows that this isn't true. And my inner child is really activated and sad and triggered, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And both can
Yeah.
exist, you know, at the
Yes,
same
the
time.
coexist. And the coexist, like learning about the and that has just changed my perception on everything. Because
Yes.
people think that it's like conflicting. But if I know this, why am I feeling this? You can know this and feel this, and both are 1,000% valid.
Yeah, yeah. And it's very, it's not for nothing. It is high level thinking to be able to hold two kind of contradicting ideas in truth at the same time. But that is like part of our conscious evolution, right? Like we have to go from being very black and white thinkers to kind of like allowing ourselves to hold greater space for what's possible, because then we release this grip of needing to control by pitting one thing against another. What is better? What's the best option? There is no, what if it's all good options? What if they're all
Yes,
great options?
right. It's a more expansive mindset, and it
Yeah.
also ties in really beautifully to mindfulness, which we just did our live on, and like a main tool that I know we both use in our work with our clients. That when we're noticing what's happening internally in our bodies as we're practicing mindfulness, many different things can be showing up, and we have, like you said, this almost like inclination to say, oh, but if I'm feeling this, how can I also be feeling this when they seem conflicting? Or if I think this, right, how can I also think this? And so having that inclusive and letting it all coexist, because we are human and complex beings where many different things can coexist, it allows for more space to actually just hold all of the feelings and all of the experiences that we have, rather than feeling like we have to stick ourselves into a box and be like this or this or this. So
Yeah.
just way more accepting in a way.
Yeah. Like we're not going to be happy when we like finally happy, quote unquote, when we like put ourselves into a box and like get the best, I don't know, whatever like convoluted version of best version of ourselves is. It's like, no, we
Right.
actually get to a space of expansion and happiness and joy and flow and all the things we seek when we release control
Mhm.
over having to know everything or having to be everything, and just allowing all things to kind of be okay to exist
Yeah.
even if they feel painful. And that's again, like you said, brings in the mindfulness piece of it, right? So we're experiencing these distressing feelings, a lot of anxiety for a lot of people right now that feels almost too overwhelming to look at, and yet they feel it every single day. It's almost like the grip on the steering wheel of your car, and you're gripping this so tightly because you're like, if I grip really hard, maybe I'll feel a sense of control and the anxiety will go away. How do we use mindfulness to like start releasing our grip of control and kind of start leaning more into almost like accepting this radical acceptance and riding the waves of these feelings that we experience? How do we use mindfulness to make it easier?
Yeah. And I love that you said easier, because that really is the goal. It is meant to be a tool to make our lives easier. So I think just going off that kind of analogy of like, you're in the driver's seat looking at the steering wheel and you have that grip on, I think mindfulness allows us to take a little bit of a step back. We might still be in that same seat, but maybe our grip loosens a little bit, and we hold space for what actually is showing up for us. So mindfulness just means intentional awareness of the present moment. So we may be experiencing both internal and external things showing up for us, right? Maybe internally we notice some anxiety or some fear, and that's why we're gripping on so hard, because we're just like grasping for that control. And maybe externally we notice, a lot of distractions that maybe overwhelm us or increase our anxiety or whatever it is. But essentially, it's just allowing ourselves to notice without judgment. And that is probably the biggest thing, is we tend to attach very heavily onto these things that show up for us. So if I am in the present moment and I, notice a thought come up, I can attach to that thought as if it defines me. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I had the thought that I, messed up on that presentation, and so I must be a failure, right? So I always ask my clients, when you had that thought, what did you make that mean about you, right? What was the interpretation that followed that thought? So I messed up on this, so it must mean I'm a failure. Is that ultimately true, or is it just an interpretation, right? So being able to discern between those two. And same thing for emotions. So when we notice anxiety show up, we tend to define ourselves as, I am an anxious person, rather than I am a human that experiences anxiety or experiences sadness or whatever emotion is showing up for you. And I think we are so quick to judge whatever's coming up because we should, as Yara always tells me, we should all over ourselves, right? So we say we shouldn't be feeling this way, or, we shouldn't be thinking this way. And when that shows up, the goal is not to then judge the fact that you're judging or blame yourself. Like, why am I judging myself so hard? It's, again, to get back to the root. So for many of my clients, the root looks like them growing up in an environment where they were not able to actually sit with their emotions or experience their emotions. And so they develop, avoidant behavior so that they avoid their emotions. So if you think about it like that, it actually is a lot easier to have more of a self-compassionate standpoint because you're making sense of how these patterns develop to begin with. I always say none of us just wake up one day and we're like, oh, we're going to choose to like self-sabotage and like destroy our lives. Like,
if only I had that voice that came up, I could have been like, wait, no,
right. It's so much easier said than done because we all do it. But the second that we're able to take a step back and almost detach in this very adaptive, helpful way of we are not our thoughts, we are not our anxiety, there is actually such a valid reason that stems back all the way from before you even probably can remember, that's below consciousness. It's once we bring that stuff to our conscious that we can then be like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. Like, this is why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
But that is a process. And so mindfulness helps us more on a daily basis of, it's kind of like a tool to get us to that root, but it's also just a tool to help us in those moments when these things show up to help detach. And even if we don't know the reason or the root in that moment, it's just understanding that there is one, right? So that takes the pressure off of ourselves to figure it out in the moment and just accept that I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I notice that this emotion is showing up. How do I want to respond to it, right? So it's creating space between when the emotion shows up and the response rather than what impulsivity is, which is emotion shows up, react right away, like not even thinking about it. So it's an empowering process because you get to be an active participant in responding to your emotions rather than becoming a victim to your emotions. And I think that process in and of itself is life-changing. Yeah. Because you actually get to feel way more in control, which is ultimately why we're gripping onto the steering wheel to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it's a liberating but simple almost concept, but it's like a life-changing one. And you've worked with a lot of clients, both in the therapy and the coaching side with these skills. What do you think are like the hardest things that people have to deal with when it comes to starting a mindfulness practice? And I can give you a couple that I've heard of as well. I think what I hear the most is like, well, I don't have time. Or, well, I don't live in a quiet space, or I don't have like a place to do this. I don't have time. I don't have a place. What would you say? What do you say to your clients when they say this? Because I get this all the time and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm sure like you and I have both also like made those excuses to ourselves.
Oh, 100%. I still make those excuses. My irrational mind is like, oh, we don't need to do this. But it's like, I just did a meditation before this and I'm like, yep, mindfulness. Yep, need to practice this every day.
Yeah. It's like once we finally do it, we're like, why are we not doing this all the time? And then when we're like, oh, we should do this today, it's like, oh, well, my dog is barking or the lawnmower, we come up with all these excuses, which is funny because we all do it. So it's very relatable. But I think, the common ones, in addition to the ones you just said, is it's really just the difficulty of slowing down when we live in a world that is so fast. So if you're new to mindfulness and you're not used to being very intentional with kind of taking, first of all, just taking time for yourself. Some of my clients, like before working with me, it's like I would ask them, you know, what do you do for self-care? What do you do to fill your cup up every day and take care of yourself? And it's like, what do you mean? I don't have time for that. Like, I got 3 kids and a dog and a husband and a job and da da da. And so it's sometimes we got to just rewind and start with the absolute basics of, can you carve out just 5 minutes in your morning, night, lunch break, wherever, to be able to spend some time with yourself rather than continuing to pour into others. And so if you've never done that, and then, you know, your therapist, your coach, or someone's telling you like, oh, you should start a mindfulness practice, and you sit down and for the first time in God knows how long, you're actually still and trying to kind of be quiet and anchoring to something, whether it's, you know, your breath or one of your 5 senses, or even just having a mindful meal, right? So many ways you can practice mindfulness, which is what I love about it. But if that's the first time you're doing that, it's going to feel almost alarming to your nervous system of like, whoa, why are we not moving 1,000,000 miles per hour? Why are we slowing down? This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel safe. Because the reason it doesn't feel safe is because then all the shit that maybe you've been repressing is coming up. I hope
Guys, busyness and distraction are ways to disassociate just as much from like what's going on internally, just as much as using substances does, or binge watching Netflix or whatever it might be, right?
Yeah. And I totally relate to that because, you know, as a therapist, it's so easy to focus on other people, right? You're focusing on your clients rather than yourself. And it's oftentimes the therapist I would notice that was neglecting their self-care, where it's like, you know, that's one of the main reasons I left the system was because we weren't practicing what we were preaching. And now in coaching, I feel like I'm actually able to actually practice what I'm preaching. I'm, you know, the same chanting that I'm assigning my clients, I do every day, and the same breathing exercises and all these skills. Like if I'm not doing it and I'm not making time to do it, then how do I expect them to make time to do it? So it's almost like you're role modeling for them. You're giving them that, you know, because like you said, growing up, maybe they didn't have parents where they did take time for themselves or role modeled and mirrored that for them. Yeah. So I think just, you know, to begin with, getting used to this idea that being still and carving out time for yourself might feel really strange at first if you're not used to it. So start small. Can you take, you know, 3 minutes, and even if it's while you're drinking your coffee in the morning or showering before driving the kids to school, can you stop and just notice, right? Mindfulness is all about simply noticing how you're feeling, checking in with your body, anchoring to, you know, let's say you're in the shower, anchoring to the water. How does the water feel? What is the temperature? How does it feel on your body? What thoughts do you notice come up? What emotions come up? And can you re-anchor to the water, right? Or whatever it might be. So there are definitely ways to start small that doesn't feel as overwhelming. And you check in with yourself, right? How is that? 3 minutes. Okay, maybe tomorrow I'll do 4. Maybe I'm just going to stick with 3 minutes for a while. And if that's all you can do, that's enough, right? That's better than nothing.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Start really small, and it's better than nothing. And actually, you'll notice actually does have it feels really profound, even if it's just a few minutes, you know, and I love the water. I love doing the kind of grounding in the water, and using showers is like such a beautiful little mindfulness practice. How does the soap smell like? How does it feel on your loofah on your body, you know? And really using and tuning into those 5 senses, and as well as your thoughts, you know, what's an introspection of your body and how your body feels, you know, is really going to be so interesting and simple yet profoundly like life-changing, because you're going to be brought back to the present moment. And so I study Tibetan Buddhism and like follow kind of Buddhist psychology, and like what they like to say, these Buddhist monks are like, anxiety is, you know, worrying about the future, and depression is being worried about or stuck in the past. And mindfulness allows you to get rid of both anxiety and depression, not really get rid of, but kind of make peace with, because you're literally looking at the slice of this moment right this second,
Yeah,
now this
a little
second,
bit
now
more.
this second, now this second, now this second. Like you're like present right here. And when you're
Right.
present right here, you can go, oh, I'm good. I'm actually,
Hmm.
I'm actually, I'm actually good right now.
Yeah.
Most of my needs are met. I'm a little hungry, so I guess I could
Right.
improve there, but that's not, life threatening.
Right.
Okay, I'm breathing, my body works, my brain works, things are going okay, I'm alive. If we're really looking at
Yeah.
the bare minimum, I'm alive and I'm breathing is like you're doing good. Um,
Yeah.
and bringing it back using like grounding tools, like showers, like using your coffee and spending just like a few minutes, like you said, just being present with the sensations and the taste and the emotion that you get when you enjoy your first cup of coffee in the morning and no one's awake yet to bother you. And I think the challenge that I want to say to those who are like, I don't have any time, you can do mindfulness while you're pooping. I don't want to hear it.
Hmm.
You can, if you, everybody poops. Everybody poops. And
Everybody
hopefully
moves.
you take a shower too. So like hopefully like those are two
Everybody
times.
get a shower.
Yeah, like hopefully, but I know some days are harder than others. But those are two times that I want to encourage you to lock the bathroom door. If you have kids, maybe they bang on it. Let that be a part of your mindfulness where you're listening and you're allowing yourself to notice what feelings come up. Oh, a little guilt for maybe locking them out and maybe a little bit of frustration that they're there. But that's the mindfulness practice. That's actually that is the practice of noticing. It doesn't have to be that everything's quiet and peaceful and at a perfect space and a perfect time with the perfect lighting. That's not what this is. It's every moment, moment to moment, bringing yourself into the present and becoming that observer, that wise observer of your experience. And that practice of doing that helps us then begin to really detach from our emotions in a very healthy way, in a sense that like we don't let them run our perception or our lived experience from day to day. We actually are pretty able to kind of like notice our emotions and not like let them take us away down the alley with them, when they feel like it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love that example because even, like the mom locking herself in the bathroom and that guilt shows up, it's practicing non-attachment to the guilt, right? Like, because okay, so you have two routes, right? What does attachment route look like? It's, oh my God, I'm feeling guilty. I shouldn't have done that. The kids probably need me. Okay, I'm going to just hurry up and finish moving and just rush out and get back to my kids, right? So that's one. Non-attachment is I notice the guilt show up, validating that it makes sense that maybe some guilt is showing up because maybe you're not used to taking time for yourself, or whatever that root is. And then almost, I like to use the analogy of like clouds floating by in the sky or leaves on the stream or whatever helps you visually imagine letting go of that emotion and returning back to the anchor. So maybe your anchor is just pooping, maybe it's brushing your teeth, maybe it's just eating a meal, whatever it is, you're just returning to it because the five senses is all we have to ground us in this present moment. And then we're just noticing all the external and internal distractions that take us away from that, not so that we can attach to them, so that we can notice them and let them go and return back to the present. Because like you said, most of us, we live in this state of either being stuck in the past or worried about a future that hasn't even happened yet. And most of the work that, you and I do with our clients is helping them not live in the past, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of that does go back to safety, where they're just in this trauma loop. And so by, some people might say, oh, well, then how come, therapy is talking about the past and we're supposed to be present? It's all in service of the present, right? We're releasing the pain from the past so that we can then be even more present rather than living from this state of pain from the past that we have yet to release or, process. So the end goal is kind of the same for whatever you're working on in your healing journey, is just to be present, because that's literally all we have, right? Can't do anything about the past, and except for, process and release and all of that. And the future isn't even here yet. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you get that inner peace, that kind of state of freedom and expansion and not necessarily attaching to what it is we're trying to run from or the pain that we're feeling or the anxiety or our lack or helplessness or, our lack of control over things we can't control. But yeah, I think what I think about too is like don't like let your own resistance get in the way. We do want to
Right.
say we don't have time. We do want to say like we don't know what to do. It's not the right environment. It's not, but if we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling like we don't have control over things, the only thing you guys might have control over is like this very moment where you can breathe deeply.
Mhm.
Let yourself check out how you're feeling. Show up for where you can, for the things that you can, that are going to help, and
Yeah.
then not attach to the anxiety as if, and let it run your decision making. It's just
Right.
like let it serve you like information, but practice these mindfulness skills because like it's a practice every day, like flex that muscle of awareness, bring it
Mhm.
back to the moment. And like you said, like there are times like that I've been in at work where you just like, back when I was working a 9 to 5, where I would be like, okay, like what's happening right now? Let me just like check in right now randomly and just do that throughout the day and just give yourself 2 minutes to just maybe breathe or maybe just be aware of what your thoughts are and just kind of give yourself a little bit of a pep talk or give yourself that space to kind of feel the feelings. But when it comes to like anxiety, this is probably one of the most important skills I think you can have to kind of mitigate that.
Yeah, the way I describe mindfulness is it's a foundation for everything else. Like all the inner work that we do or anything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis in just like busy life, right? Mindfulness sets the foundation for how we're going to do all those things if we're
Mm-hmm.
able to actually observe and describe to ourselves like what's happening and fully, participate in the present moment. So
Yeah.
even with the excuse of like, oh, I don't have time, it's like all the stuff that, you're busy with that you not feel like you have time for mindfulness. Mindfulness will only help you be more present for all those things.
100%. 100%.
And the backbone to all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to show up in your life with a full cup and with the capacity to show up for your kids with like more patience and your partner and your
Mhm.
career with more, patience and compassion and also like productivity, this actually is the thing that makes you more productive. It makes you operate at a higher level, at a higher vibration, and you get to be happier and more
Yeah.
joyous because you're literally injecting moments of joy into your day by being present and like finding, things that make you feel good. I love cleaning. If you clean anyway, if you're like a cleaner and you like to organize your space, that's a mindfulness practice. You can just like be
Absolutely.
present with the organization and the feelings of satisfaction when you put things all lined up and wipe things down. And like that is a
Yeah.
really beautiful, easy mindfulness practice that we probably all do every day too.
Yeah, mindfulness can absolutely be productive. It's just about noticing, are you doing one thing at a time, right? Or doing it one mindfully? Because, how many of us we eat in front of the TV? I know I'm guilty of that sometimes,
Yeah,
like,
same.
or we're we're
Sometimes.
talking to someone while on our phone, or we're reading and getting a pedicure, right? And that's not to say that we can't still do those combination of things, here and there when we're feeling called to do them. Absolutely. And we just want to be mindful of, are we taking at least some moments to just do one thing at a time? So like when I'm cleaning, I like to listen to music, and sometimes, and nothing wrong with that. And sometimes I'm intentional about, what, I'm going to leave the music off because that's engaging, right? That's like
Yeah.
almost like another anchor. I could just do mindfulness around listening to music. So if I'm cleaning, maybe I'll just focus on the cleaning and notice like what comes up in that moment. And like you said, the reason why we're talking about all this to begin with is because the number one kind of deliverable, if you consistently practice mindfulness, is science shows it does increase happiness. And
Yeah.
that's the point, right? Like, what's the point of living if we can't experience joy and happiness?
Yeah.
So it makes you a lot more grateful and tuned into the present so that you're not just in this constant state of, in your mind, focusing on the past or the present or the future. You're actually able to just be. And that's so simple, yet effective and powerful.
Oh,
right?
I love that. So guys, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do mindfulness, this sounds great. The easiest way in, through your senses. Anchor in the moment, be present, go through each one of your senses. What can you see right now? What can you smell right now? What can you taste? What can you touch? What can you hear? Did I say hear? I don't know, but you know.
Yeah, you covered all of them. Yeah.
Go through all the
And
five.
also, if you're a parent doing that with kids, like when I used to work with elementary school age, that was their favorite game. Like, oh, can we play the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game, right? So you could do it at any age, but especially if you're a parent who's struggling to practice that, that's something you can do with your child. So it's like you're doing mindfulness and bonding all at the same time.
Oh my God, I'm like such a big proponent of like any of my mamas who work with me, I'm like, you can totally do this with your kids. Like I teach them these skills early on so they can like really understand how their emotions work and not attach to them and experience that kind of suffering we put ourselves through when emotions are just like information for us to make proper decisions based off of what we're feeling, you know?
Right.
But and that we all deserve that inner peace. So just try with your senses. That's it. That's like the easiest way to go. And then talk to someone like Rachel, go check out her page, work with her. I also do this with my clients as a part of our practice, whether you're a business client or a mental health coaching client of mine. It's so, to me, one of the building blocks and fundamentals of living a life that truly feels, as much as it can, like a life on your terms. Like your experience is your experience that you have control over, because even in the most chaotic times, the most stressful times, the most painful times, if you can have 1 minute, 10 seconds, 5 seconds experiencing pleasure from the most amazing sandwich.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But if you can experience like your favorite taste or a sound of, like, for me, I used to play classical music and I love Debussy and the romantic era of classical music. And like, if I can hear like Reverie or I can hear one of his like preludes, like I go into a state of mental bliss. And that is what we're really talking about here, is like creating those moments of mental bliss and bodily bliss for yourself, because you can still have those 10 seconds of joy in the day long of suffering. And those 10 seconds will keep you going.
Yeah. And those add up, right? Those small like glimmer moments, they definitely add up. And even if it's just right before bed, like I use an app called Relax Melodies. And so before going to bed, like I kind of set the tone in my room. I put the Relax Melodies on, I turn off the light, and I just lay there and I listen to it for a few minutes before falling asleep. And I leave it on all night. Like that's my white noise while I'm sleeping. But I am also I at least try and be very intentional about just listening to it before I'm actually asleep. So that I can appreciate it and just like notice what's coming up for me. Because it's, maybe the first time all day that you've actually just sat still after a busy day. So just laying down and being like, okay, at the end of the day, how am I feeling? Let's do a quick check-in. It's, as humans, we love to overcomplicate. So this is everyone's reminder that these things can be so much simpler than we make them out to be in our head. And you deserve happiness. You deserve to decrease your suffering and get out of your head and really just enjoy whatever the present moment has to offer. And this is also for moments that are not the most pleasant in life. Just being able to tune in to those emotions as well is so, so important, so they don't get buried beneath the surface or the to-do list.
Absolutely. Oh, I really love this conversation, and I think it's so timely. So thank you for joining me and for being here, for giving us your wisdom today, Rachel. And for those who are, oh, you're so welcome. And for those who are like excited about this and want to maybe work with you, what do you have going on and how can we find you?
Yeah, so I have my one-on-one emotional wellness coaching program called Insight. And I actually just opened 2 spots for September. One of them just got filled, so I do have one left.
Ooh, get it!
So perfect timing for this. So if you want to learn more about it, I mean, this is stuff that we focus on, mindfulness and teaching you concrete skills that I know I never learned in therapy my whole life, of how to manage anxiety and also getting to the root of it so we can release that trauma and have you guys be living in a state of expansion rather than survival and sickness and scarcity and all that not so fun stuff. So yeah, if you head to the link in my bio, my Instagram is just at Rachel_Kelley_Coaching. And
we'll put it all in the notes as well, you guys, so you can find her easily.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all on my website. So check it out and always feel free to DM me with any questions at all. But this stuff is my jam, as I know it's yours too. I could talk about mindfulness and anxiety forever and ever, because it's so important. You know, we all deserve to live the best life.
Oh my God, we do. You guys, and it's all like, I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh the other day again, and he's like, life is a perception and all perceptions are false. So you get to choose. So
exactly.
You know,
I tell my clients that all the time. They're like, well, it's just, you know, they state things as if they're facts. And then I look at them and I'm like, is that a fact? Feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. They are feelings. And that's the beautiful thing about them is they are temporary and they change and they are not facts. Yeah. So we have so much more control over how we perceive things and manage our feelings and all of that than we give ourselves credit for. So
yes.
Yeah.
This is the tip of the iceberg, you guys. Yeah. And if you have any questions, you guys, like, this is all stuff we love to talk about. So DM us, don't be shy. Let us know your takeaways, take a screenshot and, you know, share it in your stories and tag us and let us know what you think. It is so important to us that like you get the skills and tools and, you know, guidance on your journey through this podcast and with everybody that comes in. And Rachel is an expert in what she does. And I've worked with her. I love to work alongside her and I'm super honored to know her. And thank you, Rachel, for taking the time and giving us your wisdom today.
Yes, my pleasure. There's nothing more I love to do. So thank you so much again for having me. This was so important and so fun.
Yes, and that's what we like to do here at OM. Keep it important, keep it fun, keep it like valuable, hopefully. And until next time, you guys, like, take care of yourselves. Give yourselves 5 minutes of mindfulness. Your homework for this week and for today and every day moving forward is give yourself like a minute of mindful bliss. And whatever that looks like for you, just own it and do it and lean into it. So we'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.
And that's our episode for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us at the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited. This next year, 2021, is going to be huge. We have so many guests that are coming on that you are going to love. I'm going to be doing some more solo casts and OM Therapy Coaching. We have so many things rolling out for you. Retreats, another round of Ignite starting in May, another one starting at the end of the summer, a mastermind, and so many other things. So be sure to stay tuned with us on Instagram. Follow me at om_therapy_coaching and stay tuned for so much goodness coming up. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. Head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and I would love to give you a free copy of my subconscious reprogramming workbook, and that is absolutely free. Just send me a screenshot of your review and on Instagram, and I will be so happy to send that over as my gift for you. And I am sending you so many hugs, so much love, and I hope that this week you are able to find just a little bit more joy in your life. Have a good one, guys.